Bizarre Brain Comics.
Hello? Hello, Dad. This is Archie. Let me talk to Mom. It's a matter of life or death.
Relax, Archie. Relax.
Hey, here we go. Gary here for Bizarre Brain Comics, where I like to talk about comics, break down some of the art, the stories, talk about the history of comics and creators, and break it down, try to break it down as art and literature. Okay. You probably saw on the intro there. Plan on talking today. It's a story in this that is reprinted in this book, Archie, his first 50 years. And this is by Charles Phillips. If you managed to find a copy, notice it says first 50 years. This book was published in 1991. That's 30 years ago. So now Archie's 80. Looks pretty good for an old goat, don't he? Okay. I'll tell you about the story when I get over there. When we get to that part. Talk here a little bit in the big book of knowledge. Archie! By 1941, costumed heroes were cropping up everywhere and were dominating comics publishing. This was true at MLJ Comics as well, when publisher John Goldwater conceived of the antithesis, that means the opposite, of these heroes, inspired by the success of the Andy Hardy movies, which starring Mickey Rooney. He wanted a strip featuring a normal teenager. He also wanted the name of that character to be Archie, after a school friend. And that's about the limit of his input at this point. So writer Vic Bloom and cartoonist Bob Montana were teamed up to create the actual character of Archie Andrews. Archie first appeared as a backup feature after the Shield in Pep Comics 22 in December of 1941. And he became so popular that he took over the main spot in Pep. And he soon got his own title shortly thereafter. Archie became so big that the company name was later changed from MLJ to Archie Comics, and he's been going strong for 80 years. And as you also saw, or rather heard in my intro there, Archie was pretty popular. He had a popular old-time radio show, comedy, in the late 40s and early 50s. Okay, Bob Montana. He was the artist who helped co-create Archie, and probably put in the bulk of the creating effort over the years, early years that is. Bob Montana is from 1920 to 1975, and he was born to a pair of vaudeville performers. If you don't know what vaudeville is, look it up. It goes back a century. In the 1930s, in 1930, the family moved to this is after the demise of vaudeville. Moved to a New Hampshire farm and opened a restaurant. He went to the Exeter School of Art and the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston as a boy. And his years at Haverhill High School in Haverhill, Massachusetts, was the basis for Archie's Town and School of Riverdale. And right down to the chocolate shop and the statue of the thinker in front of the high school. And so much of the elements introduced into the comics in the early days was created by Bob Montana and was inspired by his own high school memories. And then years later, in the 60s and 70s, Bob did the newspaper version of the strip until his death in 1975. Now, Archie was just humor, goofy situations and setups, and but eventually, not eventually, it didn't take very long for it to focus primarily on the teenagers and their humorous exploits at dating, trying dating, and the eternal love triangle of Archie, Betty, and Veronica. Okay, let's go take a look at Archie in his first 50 years. Yeah, Archie. And featuring Bob Montana and Vic Bloom, undoubtedly other writers after that. I'm not going to talk about this story too much, but I just wanted to point it out. This is the splash page, the very first page of the very first appearance of Archie from Pep 22. And as you look through here, it's very cartoonish, completely looks nothing like Archie does today. And I'm not talking about the realistic one. The style is the well-known Archie stylization. Now, if you take a look at this, you can see, if you were to read the story, I got the general impression, and which was also confirmed when I was reading the text in this book, that Archie, at this point, he seemed younger than what we know. I would say maybe around 12 or 13 or so. Here he is showing off for the new girl who just moved in next door, Betty. That's Betty. And seemed to be a big combination of Andy Hardy and Tom Sawyer. He seemed a lot more like Tom Sawyer. And then after that, he was older. He and the other characters were older, in high school, dating, and the like. And probably about eternally 16 to 17. Okay, and here's the story I want to talk about. This is Nobody's Dummy from Pep 1964, Pep number 64 from 1947. Okay, and here's the splash panel. Archie is with Veronica. And Veronica was quite a looker. In the later 40s and early 50s, the women in these comics were very sexy. They kind of toned that down a bit, especially after the introduction of the Comics Code. Okay, here's Archie and Betty. Archie and Veronica wants Archie to pick up a dummy for a sewing class. This is a sewing dummy, or try to find one. And he said, "Hey, I know the window trimmer at the fur-teen shop. I'll get you a real dummy. A mannequin? Yeah." And he takes off in his jalopy. The jalopy, his car. He got that early on, and he kept that jalopy in the comics until probably the early 80s, before he got a more modern car. Here he is, getting a dummy from the tailor shop. Goes to put it in the car, and bam, he gets bumped from behind. Or he hits a bump in the road, and the dummy goes flying out. This is just sheer madness. It's not like the typical Archie story, but it is a funny story. So he's goes to pick up the dummy, and part of it fell apart, and so he goes to hammer it back together again there. Old lady sees that, thinks someone's being killed, calls the cops. Puts the dummy back in the car. There's the cops. They spot him. They're real goofy-looking cops. Yeah. Oh, Chief, just one little shot. I said no. Now put that away. This guy, he's just eager to shoot somebody. He's going into the school. He carries that in, crashes right into Mr. Weatherby. He looks pretty much the same. Archie, is this another of your confounded pranks? That was really good, Archie. And later, they had a tendency, depending on who the artist was, to not show quite as much linear perspective like we see in this panel here. It was just a simplified, again, depending on the artist, simplified perspective. But even here is more boldly represented. So he crashed into Mr. Weatherby. Mr. Weatherby puts the dummy in the closet. Said, of all the idiotic things, bringing a dummy to school, as if we don't have enough here. So he just called Archie a dummy. And in the process, he gets some red ink spilled on him. That's Mr. Weatherby. He goes to clean it off, and the cop spots him says, "Can I shoot, Chief?" Make ready. He's making a getaway, and they clunk Mr. Weatherby on the head. Oh, Weatherby isn't here. I can get my dummy back. He goes to get the dummy and leaves the door open. Well, one of the ladies, this could be, I don't know who this lady is. Could be Betty, but I don't know. Steps into the closet there to adjust her stocking. So no one can see her. Mr. Weatherby is trying to explain to the cops. So he goes to go get the dummy. Without looking, reaches into the closet, and there you go. It's looks kind of like a lecherous move there. Grabs the lady by the, almost her bum, but upper thigh. She must be a secretary or something in the school. "Oh, how dare you, old wolf! I quit!" She grabs the gun from the cop. This is good. So fairly quick way to draw it. Good storytelling. And really pushes the characters forward, showing it in silhouette, and you don't have to bother with background in that shot. That's well done. It's a humor, just a series of humorous slapstick events with stuff that doesn't get shown so much in these comics. So knocks Mr. Weatherby out. "Isn't this where we came in?" says the cop, hauling him away. There's Betty. She's scolding Archie. "Where have you been?" "I ran into trouble, about 200 pounds of it." Of course, Mr. Weatherby, he'd probably weigh a lot more than 200 pounds. "And here, put the dummy behind that screen. I'll get it when we're ready." And then there's Miss Grundy. And again, she just sees the silhouette, and she doesn't realize that it's a dummy. Eek! Sees him putting it there. Benny's look from the shadows, looks like he's kissing the girl. Oh, that really ticks Miss Grundy off because she's an old biddy. And Archie leaves. "Ha! I knew it, Archie. And I'll bet the hussy is Veronica." Then here we are in the sewing class. All the material is cut. Then they go, this one's Betty. And then she goes to get the dummy. Oh, there's a spider on the dummy. She happens to have the scissors in her hand. "I'll kill it." And of course, Miss Grundy sees this in silhouette and thinks Betty is stabbing Veronica. Oh, just so funny. And here's the cop still with Mr. Weatherby. "Chief, let me take one shot." "Shut up. We have to find the body or we don't have a case." Wow. So they're looking all over the school. Here, you can see on the poster, enter now swimming contest. And yeah, that's quite a nifty looking lady on that poster. Mr. Weatherby finds Miss Grundy, who's been passed out. And she screams, she tells the cops, but there is no body. I saw Betty stab her after Archie left. I thought so. Let's go to the source of all trouble. So they go get Archie. Yeah, of course. And Archie's sweating bullets. He doesn't know why he's in trouble. He didn't do anything. Of course he didn't. It's just a series of unfortunate events. See, watch, I'll prove it's a dummy with this pin. Here they see the dummy. Ah, what the heck? It's Jughead. Jughead? There's the dummy. It was so large, so we used Jughead. Yeah, the dummy was so they used that dummy for a dummy. Well, it looks like we were all dummies. Just get that out of here. Take it with you. Now, Chief. Huh? Now, can I take a shot? Yes, go ahead. You can shoot the dummy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I wanted to shoot this gun ever since I got it. Takes a bead. Click. No bullets. Hey, Chief, when can I start loading up? No bullets. Kind of like Barney Fife from the Andy Griffith Show. Oh, and that's the end. And that was a fun little story. Just slapstick. And it was, I guess at the times, it was considered one of the best really funny stories for Archie. Here you see some classic covers from the 40s. Betty and Veronica. There's Archie and Veronica, I meant. And there's Betty dreaming about Archie. There's Archie in class taking a look at Veronica as she walks by. Oh, that's sure fun. Here's some of the other later Archie stuff. Get into the 60s and 70s. It became big business. Had all these comics, had the radio show, had the cartoon in the 60s and 70s, even spin-offs like here, you can see. Focus on it. Yeah, Josie and the Pussycats, they had their own show. Sabrina the Teenage Witch had her own show. Then in the 90s, they had a Sabrina sitcom. Now, of course, we have television, a mature version of Archie in Riverdale. And goofy stuff. And in the, I believe it was 80s, they had a TV movie that I think was intended to be a pilot for a TV series. It was fun. It was a return to Riverdale. It was Archie and the gang, all grown up, come back for a class reunion to Riverdale High, and it was interspersed when it was originally aired on television. It was interspersed with flashbacks, and the older actors were then playing their younger selves, but they dressed and they had very artificial looking sets and backgrounds to look like the comics. But years later, when I got on VHS, all those flashbacks had been cut out. Here we have more modern. I say more modern. This is the 60s, maybe 70s. Yeah, 68. All kinds of other stuff. Archie was just a lot of fun. Well, I'll cover Archie again because it's got 80 years. Some of the other stuff. But it's a lot of fun. The artwork is good and solid. Good storytelling. Bob Montana was a consummate professional. It just took a while for the stylization to gel and become the standard. And not only became the standard for Archie, for those Archie comics, but became the standard for this type of comic, because both Marvel and DC had teen humor titles at various times over the years, and they adopted this, more or less this style, Archie style, and it even blended over into parody and some underground comics in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. used Archie Comics. I've used it myself for some stuff. And that is Archie, his first 50 years. That was a fun little story. Nobody's Dummy by Bob Montana. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe. Definitely share it with any comic book friends you've got who might get a little kick out of this. Remember, comics are art.